California rental laws outline the rules in the state regarding lease agreements and eviction. We'll overview the laws for standard lease agreements, month-to-month lease agreements, and evictions. Standard lease agreement. A standard lease outlines the terms between a landlord and tenant for the renting of a property. A standard lease is commonly a one-year fixed period and is the most widely used rental contract. Month-to-month lease. A month-to-month lease is an agreement between a landlord and tenant that renews automatically every month. The agreement terminates upon notice by either the landlord or tenant. The notice must be provided by the landlord or a tenant a minimum of 30 days prior to termination as required by law. If the tenant has lived in the property for more than 1 year, the minimum notice is 60 days. Required disclosures. In California, the landlord is required to provide the following disclosures as part of the lease agreement. Bed bugs. The landlord must acknowledge any prior existence of bed bugs before tenancy. Additionally, the tenant must confirm that their furniture does not contain bed bugs. Demolition. If a landlord has any permit to demolish the residential unit, it must be disclosed before entering into a rental agreement or accepting payment. Flooding. The landlord is required to inform the tenant if the residence is located in special flood hazard areas. Megan's Law. All residential contracts in California are required to contain specific notices about Megan's Law. Mold. The landlord must attach a mold disclosure form to the lease, which provides the tenant with information about potential health risks. Ordinance locations. The landlord of a residential dwelling unit who has actual knowledge of any former federal or state ordinance locations in the neighborhood area shall give written notice to a prospective tenant of that knowledge prior to the execution of a rental agreement. Pest control. If any corrective action has been taken to eliminate pests, an inspection report from the pest control company must be provided to the tenant. Shared utilities. If the residence has a shared meter, the agreement must outline how utilities will be split between parties. Smoking policy. If smoking is allowed on the residence, the landlord must define where it is permitted, including common areas. Landlord access. In California, the landlord is required to provide at least 24 hours notice before entering the property for repairs or any non-emergency reason. 48 hours is required if the access is for move-out inspection. Security deposit laws. In California, the landlord may request a maximum of 3 months' rent at lease signing if the residence is furnished. If it is unfurnished, the landlord may request a maximum of 2 months' rent. After the termination of the lease, the landlord is required to return the money within 21 days. Eviction laws. There are 3 legally accepted causes for eviction in California. Non-payment of rent. If the tenant is late on rent, the landlord can issue a 3-day notice to pay or quit. This gives the tenant 3 days to pay the rent in full, along with any penalties, or vacate the property. If they do neither, the landlord may be forced to seek an eviction form from the court. Curable non-compliance. If the tenant breaks any portion of the lease other than late rent, the landlord may give the tenant 3 days to either comply with the lease or vacate the property. Incurable non-compliance. An incurable non-compliance can be issued when the tenant commits an offense they cannot remedy, such as engaging in illegal acts on the property. In this case, the landlord may provide the tenant with a 3-day notice to vacate. Additional notices. If a tenant is a victim of domestic violence or stalking in California, they have the right to terminate the lease with a minimum of 14 days notice.